Okay, our next speaker is Belana Rhodehamel, and she is with the Washington State Conservation Commission. Belana manages the riparian plant propagation program to improve the availability of native riparian trees and shrubs for restoration projects, supporting statewide salmon recovery. Their responsibilities include assessing statewide demand for plants, coordinating contract grows with nurseries, managing grant opportunities for district holding sites, and matching plants with restoration initiatives. Alana?
This presentation is going to be switching gears a little bit. I'm going to be talking about funding. And I am very excited today to talk about the riparian plant propagation at the Conservation Commission. Some of you already know of this program and are even actively participating in it, but I'm going to give a general overview for those that aren't familiar. I'm also going to highlight some district projects and talk about some future opportunities with the program. So before I begin, I would like to do an overview of the Conservation Commission and talk about who we are and what we do. Our agency focuses on voluntary and incentive-based work centered around working with the 45 conservation districts around the state and then also other partners as well. So at the Commission, we don't directly manage land or implement projects. We provide oversight and accountability for public funds. We provide policy guidance and leadership. We support conservation district operations, and then we also provide programs and funding. So as I mentioned before, one of those programs is the Riparian Plant Propagation Program, and we've shortened that to RPPP, so that's what I'll use for the rest of the presentation. And then after my presentation, my wonderful colleague Jody is also going to be highlighting a couple of the Commission's other programs, so you will get to learn about other opportunities more than just RPPP. So jumping into a program overview for RPPP, this program has an annual budget of around $1 million with a main goal of supporting salmon recovery. It's still a fairly new program. It's a little over 2 years old, and it was developed in response to statewide challenges surrounding plant demand. So to respond to these demand challenges, the program focuses on increasing the availability of native trees and shrubs for streamside restoration. And there are a couple different ways we are trying to address plant availability barriers that I'll go through all of that in the next slide. In this program, we have general pots of funding that are involving various stakeholders. The first one is propagation. So for this portion of the program, we aim to work with nurseries to ramp up the propagation of trees and shrubs. The second is cultivation. This is funding for conservation districts to support growing out propagated trees and shrubs. So an example of this would be districts purchasing bare root plants from a nursery and then repotting those to grow out until ready to be implemented in a restoration project. And then the last component is restoration, that is matching plants with riparian restoration groups. This one has a couple different avenues for how plants can be received. And then I also wanted to point out that these arrows are signifying how each section of the program overlap. So for example, if you look at the two bottom arrows, restoration groups can partner with districts to receive plants. Districts can also partner with restoration groups to receive space to build a holding site. This is kind of a general view, but I'll go into each and every one of these and talk about how they all overlap. We will start with propagation. So as I mentioned before, this is to support plant propagation with nurseries. To do this, this program does contract grows, same thing, same work that Peter was talking about in his last presentation, to provide plants to restoration groups. We do this through an annual competitive solicitation. Nurseries are able to bid on plants that they're interested in growing, and then we pay for those plants with the program at the end of the grow period. And then those plants are distributed to restoration groups. Those plants are propagated for about 2 to 3 years, depending on the species. And an example of how that timeline works, we just finished signing contracts for a solicitation we had put out last spring with a few nurseries for a contract grow. So I think some of you may even be receiving some of those plants, and those are going to be grown and distributed in the fall of 2026 and spring of 2027. And those are just a variety of native trees and shrubs, and that can include bare root, pots, live stake, anything that is native riparian tree and shrub. We have had some people ask about some specific wetland species, but we aren't able to have that as a part of the program as of this point. Okay, the next is cultivation. I wanted to talk about some annual funding for the Conservation District to support creation, expansion, and maintenance of holding sites where trees and shrubs can be grown out until ready to be implemented in riparian restoration projects. We do allow some propagation as this part of the program, but it is limited. And districts can work with partners, including tribes, restoration groups, a variety. And for this, we fund infrastructure such as greenhouses, fences, any of the unique needs of each conservation district. We do fund materials, trees and shrubs, and then also labor. As of right now, if you look on the map, we have 14 holding sites. We have about 186,000 plants currently being cultivated at these sites. And then I also wanted to just highlight a few really interesting projects. I wanted to start with Jefferson Conservation District's holding site. This is a newer holding site and currently has around 3,000 plants. I would say this is what we would typically see in a holding site. If you look down below on the bottom right photo, you can see they put up a fence. They also installed shade cloths, some gravel and liners, irrigation system. And I wanted to highlight them because they're partnering with the North Olympic Salmon Coalition, so it's an interesting partnership. And their site is a conglomerate of several operations, including a food bank garden, the Organic Seed Alliance, a demonstration garden, and also native plant sales. And because of this, they have lots of volunteers around to help with plant maintenance for the whole nursery. And then a second highlight, I wanted to show Kitsap Conservation District's holding site. Theirs is a little unique. They worked with John Knox at the Plant Materials Center to install gravel beds for cultivating trees. And before in their 1,500 square foot space, they were only able to hold around 4,000 1-gallon pots, and they can now hold 10,000 trees and shrubs. So it's 2.4 times more space efficient. And then with the drip irrigation, they are also 85% more water efficient than overhead sprinklers. And we have a few other districts that are implementing this method now as part of the program, but Kitsap was the first underneath RPPP to implement this, the gravel beds. Okay, circling back to the main components of the program, we talked about propagation and cultivation, and then the last one is restoration. And so this has a couple different avenues. Restoration groups can partner with districts to receive plants or work on a holding site together. The other avenue is through contract grows. To make the order for the contract grows, we rely on restoration groups to let us know what plants they need. To do this, we have an annual plant needs form that's open to districts, nonprofits, tribes, counties, state and government agencies. And so we ask for plants that restoration groups think they may need in the future, a couple years out. That could be plants that are needed every year, or maybe it's a plant that is challenging to find, like maybe a specific seed zone. And then after we receive those forms in the spring, the nurseries then bid, and then we reach out in the fall to confirm orders for who applied. And so we pay for the plants and the delivery of those plants for the restoration groups who make an order. And then for this part of the program, we're hoping that it helps limit the guesswork nurseries have to make for plant demand, and then also provide some relief to restoration groups by securing plants needed for projects and maybe even some leverage for restoration funding. I just wanted to go talk about some future opportunities in the program. So for propagation, we have another round of contract growth starting soon. A competitive solicitation will be coming out. I also wanted to mention that we will be releasing an RFI, request for information, in February, just to gather some feedback. We've had 2 contract grow rounds officially now, and so we want to hear both from nurseries who have participated, but also from nurseries who have interest and may find barriers in participating. We want to make sure that this program is successful and that doing these contract grows are actually supporting nurseries. For cultivations, we'll have applications open in May for the next fiscal year. We're going to start with a limited application just for labor costs so that everything can be covered July 1st to maintain plants, and then we'll have a full RFA come out in June. And then lastly, for restoration, we will be having a plant needs form coming this spring. If you are interested, please keep an eye out. It'll most likely come out in March. And same thing as contract grows. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear it. We are still tweaking both the contracts and the forms, so I want to make sure this is supporting restoration groups as well. Thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions. And then, of course, here's my contact information if you think of something later.
Is this only for commercial nurseries, this program?
Yeah, so nurseries, in order to apply in the competitive solicitation, have to have a nursery license in Washington State.